What's going on, y'all? I'm KM Best. Marvel Snap just nerfed Thanos and Shuri. Let's get into it. The first nerf to Thanos is that he is now a 6'10 instead of a 6'11. This maintains his vulnerability to Shang-Chi. It maintains the fact that when the Power Stone is on the board, he's one of the strongest units in the game. Only the Infinite can match him for power, and that is good flavor. Other than that, I don't think this nerf does much. The second nerf is that the Space Stone, instead of sending a unit away from the lane you play it on, now summons a unit to the lane you play it on, similar to Cloak. This helps to alleviate the Lockjaw play pattern with the Space Stone, where you would play the Space Stone into Lockjaw along with some other stones, move the Lockjaw over to another lane, and then do the whole thing again. On the other hand, it also does kind of make the Space Stone pretty useful for redistributing your power. It definitely doesn't hurt the Space Stone as much as people might think. The Space Stone is still going to be a very powerful card. It's still going to be one of the better stones in Thanos. It just sort of takes away that specific Lockjaw high roll. The third nerf to Thanos is actually a nerf to Quinjet. They made it so Quinjet can only reduce cards to a minimum cost of 1. This means that the stones will no longer end up costing 0 when you have a Quinjet on the board. Now, this is a very significant nerf. I would say this is the most significant nerf to the Thanos deck, period. There are other ways of potentially fixing this. You know, maybe they could have made it so the stones start in your deck, but second dinner developer Glenn Jones said they didn't want to make it too confusing. They didn't like that nerfing Quinjet in this way hurt other decks, but they felt like it was necessary. Now, one nerf that you won't see here is a nerf to Leech. Glenn Jones also addressed that. He said that the reason that Leech is not being nerfed is it was only good in one deck. That deck was Thanos, and they think that maybe if they tune down Thanos, Leech will show up a little bit less as well. I generally agree with that sort of thought process. You know, cards are good in context. I think it is smart to address the context the card exists in rather than just slamming it, nerfing it out of existence, doing what they did to Leader. That said, you know, I do expect people to maybe be upset by the fact that this is probably still going to be a good deck. My instinct with Thanos is there are plenty of other ways to build it. I think it's still going to be a powerful card, and I think, you know, maybe that's good. Maybe it's good that the card that everyone should be buying with their tokens is worthwhile. Although I do think Second Dinner should take a second to think, you know, okay, we're giving all these new players, these newer players who haven't completed Series 3, a bunch more tokens with this update, right? Now, what is the best thing for them to spend those tokens on? They can't spend it on Series 3 cards. It does sort of look like there's going to be a lot of people spending tokens on Thanos, and probably a lot of people spending tokens on Shuri. Speaking of Shuri, let's get to her next. Shuri, as a deck, also took 3 nerfs. Now, these nerfs were, in my opinion, significantly less impactful than the nerfs to Thanos. In fact, 2 of the nerfs that are sort of targeted at Shuri also hit cards that the Thanos deck runs. The only card that was specifically run in Shuri that saw a hit was Red Skull. Red Skull went from a 5/15 to a 5/13, but in exchange, he saw his debuff, or his opponent buff, reduced. Now he only raises the power of your opponent's cards by 1. And frankly, I'm not even sure this is a nerf to him in the context of Shuri. Most of the time when you play him, he's going to get you going up the same amount of power. So for example, if you played a 30 power Red Skull in a full lane for your opponent, he was effectively 22 power because he was giving them 8. Now you'll play a 26 power Red Skull. He'll give your opponent 4 power. He's still effectively 22 power after a Shuri. It's a dangerous card still. I still expect this deck to be around significantly. I think this is going to be a deck that we are going to see in the future. Now, other nerfs that affected cards in Shuri, She-Hulk got toned down from a 6'10 to a 6'9, and of course, Arrow. This one makes me sad. Arrow now only moves the last card your opponent played, and if you read the developer comments on this, they're basically exactly my line of thought. Arrow was sort of a card that prevented Galactus from being dominant. It was a cool, interactive card, and you want a card like that to exist in your game. The reason they nerfed it was because it kind of pushed out everything else at the 5-drop slot, and that's not good. Now there's definitely more options for players at the 5-drop slot, but Arrow as a catch-all counter to everything, those days might be over. They also made a couple function changes, and one of them in particular does affect Shuri significantly. The function changes they made were the cards like Mystique, Absorbing Man, and Taskmaster now no longer target cards that have been destroyed. Taskmaster could previously target a Red Skull that had died as long as it was still the last card you played. Now, Taskmaster cannot do that anymore. And that is a relatively significant nerf. It might be more significant than any other Shuri nerf that has existed in this patch. That said, what it does do is push you further towards playing Cosmo and Armor in an effort to protect your Red Skull or whatever other big unit you have that you want to hit with Taskmaster in the first place, which also pushes you, in my opinion, farther away from playing cards like Sauron because your Armor and Cosmo are going to be so important to the deck now. They also made a couple changes to cards like Morbius and Null. Now, instead of showing their power in the hand or in the deck, they'll only show when you play them. However, for Null, instead of making it so he only shows when you play him, he's still going to update in the hand, and their explanation for this can be seen right here. As far as my thoughts on it, I don't think it's particularly impactful. These are just sort of functional changes that aren't going to change how you want to play these cards or where you want to play these cards or what decks you want to play these cards in. They also updated the text on Black Widow's Widow's Bite so it more accurately reflects what the card actually does. It prevents you from drawing, not just with anything, but it prevents, like, say, Mind Stone from drawing cards out of your deck, right? That is something that it already had the functionality to do, but if you read the card, maybe it wouldn't be that clear. Next, let's look at a couple decks that might shine even after the nerfs for both Thanos and Shuri. First up, we have a Thanos mid-range deck that is similar to a deck that Mega Mogwai brought to the 983 Infinity Gauntlet Invitational. It's also similar to a deck that won a couple tournaments in France. It did used to rely on Quinjet a little bit more. It's just a classic mid-range Thanos deck. No higher rolls, just fair gameplay, or as fair as Thanos can be. It does run Kang. I'm not sure he's necessary. I put a Valkyrie in here as I think Valkyrie is just very strong. With the absence of Arrow, my general thought process when building these decks was Arrow is probably no longer an auto-include. Valkyrie, in my opinion, especially in the Thanos lists, is the next strongest card for this, especially if we expect to see a rise in Shuri, and specifically a rise in Shuri with Armor in the deck. So one way to get past Armor is to play Valkyrie. Obviously, it doesn't get past Cosmo, but it's still a good thing to do with Thanos, especially in the context of the Soul Stone and Blue Marvel, which you could put in this deck if you felt the need to. Speaking of Valkyrie, Soul Stone, and Blue Marvel, this deck was built by Den. It was a deck that he used to play before the rise of the mighty Thanos Lockjaw. It is a sort of scam-based Thanos deck with Spider-Man and Valkyrie with Blue Marvel. You also get to play a normal Zoo game plan with Khazar and Blue Marvel and all the stones. You are a little vulnerable to Killmonger. It does happen. It's possible that Armor can go in this deck. It's also possible that you might want to look into the old Ordinary Harry build of Thanos, where you play, Valkyrie, Leech, Spectrum, Khazar. You actually get to put Armor in there. I think that might be a very viable method of going forward with the Thanos archetype. The final Thanos potential future I would like to highlight is a deck built by Irim, and it is a Thanos super high roll Lockjaw deck. He won the Snap Fan Open with this deck. Obviously not this exact deck. He was running Quinjet instead of Psylocke. He didn't have America Chavez in there. I made a few changes, but the fundamental thing that he was doing here is he is a Killmonger Thanos deck. Killmonger allows you to clear up your board and high roll heavily with Lockjaw, so it lets you play Lockjaw into lanes that already have stones in them. We even have a Death and a Wave in case we somehow get to pull off the Death Wave combo after playing our Killmonger. But what I really like about this deck is the way it leverages Wave. So, Wave into Odin can really slow your opponent down. Wave Dr. Doom Odin is a really powerful thing to do. It leans further into the Wave aspect of the Death Wave Thanos archetypes. And frankly, I think if we start seeing a lot of Zoo Thanos, this could be a very viable starting point for what the deck that beats Zoo Thanos in the mirror would look like. Finally, we have post-nerf Shuri. It looks exactly the same, except I replaced Arrow with Vision. I don't even know if that's right. Maybe it should be Spider-Woman. I chose Vision because, again, keeping your guy alive is going to be important. Vision is a very scary card to play against. You could play Captain Marvel. You could pick a 5-drop, put it in there. You're probably going to be fine. I am also interested, I should say, in revisiting the Agents of Shuri build, where instead of playing, Vision here, we have a sort of Devil Dinosaur backup game plan. I think that could be pretty plausible going forward. I'm interested to see where that goes as well. As far as other decks that I think might have a bit of time to shine here, Sarah decks were held down a lot by Leech, and you'll notice that not a lot of the Thanos decks that I put on the board have Leech. If we end up seeing still a bunch of Leech, Sarah decks might not be the optimal thing to be doing, but I think a lot of the Thanos decks that I just put up here, they are going to be in trouble against a competently piloted Sarah deck. The issue is Shuri is such a dangerous card now. The Shuri list is just a very strong list straight up, and finding something that beats it reliably is going to be tough. Thanos was that deck. I wonder if it still can be, and that's part of why I'm so invested in trying to figure out if Thanos can still be good, because I know that used to beat Shuri, and if we can make it still beat Shuri, then it's probably fine, but I'm not positive about it. What are your thoughts on the patch? What are your thoughts on the decks that you're going to be playing going forward with this patch? I want to hear them. Leave them in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Have a good one.